All right, I'm Frank Duff. I'm here with Israel and Eric from Cybereason. And so what this forum is supposed to be is to discuss attack, the goods, the bads, how are people communicating with it? How are people mapping to it? How do people use it more effectively? And so I'm really glad to have both Eric and Israel on this call and Cybereason support through this program. But before we go deep into the stories around attack, let's first introduce the participants, starting with Eric. Can you give a little bit about yourself and then a little bit about Cybereason as well?
Sure. Thanks, Frank, and glad to be on here today. My name is Eric Sun. I'm part of the product team for XDR here at Cybereason. Been at Cybereason for 2.5 years, prior experience in SIM and automated red team. And so, yeah, looking forward to the fireside chat today.
And Israel, do you want to give a little bit about yourself?
Of course, and thank you so much, Frank, for having us. I'm Israel Barak, CISO at Cybereason. My background is primarily defensive and offensive cyber operations, primarily in the government and defense sectors. I've been in cyber since the mid-90s and joined Cybereason about 7 years ago, and enjoying every minute of it, including quite a few years of that experience working together with you, Frank.
Absolutely, and I really appreciate that experience, and that actually leads to a wonderful segue. And can you guys give a little bit about Cybereason as a whole, right? So as you mentioned, Israel, it's you've been around it for 7 years, and it's been around, and it's evolved a fair amount even in the past 4, especially as the EDR market took off, and you got now MDR, XDRs, and all the like. So can you guys give a little bit of background? Maybe Eric, you can start off and give a little bit of feedback on what exactly is Cybereason up to these days?
Yeah, sure. So we're Cybereason. We just celebrated our 10-year anniversary just a couple weeks ago. Like you touched on, our roots are in endpoint detection and response and next generation antivirus. We also have a great managed detection and response, and also deliver our platform to market with our partners. Most interestingly, the past 2 years, we've been working on our extended detection and response platform and strategy. And really the idea here is to stop those key attacks that folks face today, whether that's ransomware, business email compromise, or attacks on identities.
That's really cool, and really good to see how you guys have expanded and continue to do well in this market, and that's really good to hear. And going into that, right? That's 10 years of history. Israel, you've been on it with the 7 years. A large number of those we've been working together, as those coincide with a lot of attacks legacy, which is probably going about 7 years old now. So going to that, what's your experience been? Why did you get started with a MITRE ATT&CK back when you did so many years ago?
Yes, of course. So we started using MITRE ATT&CK in 2017. The motivation was to adopt a standard taxonomy to represent behavioral detection information, basically to security analysts, incident responders, and threat hunters, to basically enable them to collaborate, to communicate, to share threat and adversary related information in a more efficient way. We found that the Cybereason approach towards detecting and classifying indicators of behavior and telemetry enrichment actually aligned extremely well with the approach that ATT&CK uses for mapping TTPs, and that enabled us to very naturally adopt that taxonomy and really enable security operators to natively leverage it when triaging incidents or when threat hunting for complex chains of behaviors or TTPs.
So you mentioned how it's the Cybereason taxonomy for how you guys look at defenses that aligns well. So can you give a little bit of an overview? I know we don't have any demos on the fly that I'll ask for, but can you give a little bit of an overview of exactly how you guys kind of structure your data to kind of give people that understanding of this is how attack would come into play, and why you mentioned that nice marriage?
Of course, the approach that we took at Cybereason, we referred to it as MALOps, or short for malicious operations. The idea is that unique indicators of behavior are often more indicative of malicious activity when strung together into chains of behaviors that represent procedures or techniques. When those techniques appear in conjunction, they tell us something about what the adversary is doing, what they're likely trying to do, or what they're likely trying to accomplish. And that's the approach that we've taken from day one, right? Essentially correlating the telemetry, enriching it into with indicators of behavior, and correlating it to form high confidence detection that tell an incident story. We invented our own sort of taxonomy at the early stages to communicate that, because when we started back in 2012, there wasn't really a standard language for that, right? Even the concepts of behavioral detections were just forming in the space, and so we sort of invented our own language. But over time, we realized that we need to take a more standard approach to describe that behavioral detection logic, to describe the enrichment that we're doing, and that really aligned extremely well with the approach that Attack took.
No, I love that story, and especially the fact that you guys kind of migrated to Attack. Obviously, as somebody that's been around Attack for a long time, I'm glad to see it kind of evolve as a de facto standard. As much as they would probably try to not call themselves a standard, it has become that way. So that makes yeah, lots of good memories there. And so how has, maybe Eric, you can take this one to start, and Israel might have something to say about it too, but how has your usage of Attack really changed, right? Attack itself has grown a lot, both in terms of just the volume of it, right? It's gone from the 77 techniques to now almost 600 techniques and sub-techniques, but then also just the knowledge of Attack has changed a lot. And so I imagine communication is even a little bit different. So how has your usage of Attack changed over that time? Or how do you use it today is an even more pointed question.
Totally. Well, it's really great to see, as we've touched on, how it's exploded from, I was lucky to see it from its inception, and now it's at 13.1, and there's, so many matrices. And certainly I think one major factor is customers are asking it a lot more, right? They want to know whether it's the MITRE coverage, they are performing attack simulations, or Cybereason. We run attack simulations, and some of those are mapped to the emulation plans, released by MITRE. I think a new thing for us is we've introduced a severity score. And so as we've expanded to XDR, now we're taking in behaviors not only from the endpoint, and as Israel touched on, those are behaviors we identify are mapped to the MITRE enterprise matrix, but now these, email and identity, workspace, cloud, we're also mapping those behaviors, growing our library of XDR detections, and certainly mapping that to the matrix, both to be able to share perhaps a heat map of our coverage, to customers, and also for our own cataloging and seeing where we need, further investment in detections, especially, in light of things like the attack evaluations or newer threats.
And Israel is somebody that has worked a little bit more maybe with the enterprise side of the house, at least historically. I'm wondering if you've seen a similar kind of evolution story, or how you guys have changed or had to use it differently through more of the enterprise side of the house.
Absolutely. I think our use of Attack is obviously now driving much of the way we communicate the data and the value that we generate to our users. But I think in addition, it's become one of the most common ways for our customers to understand our visibility and detection coverage, and I think is now an integral part of how incident responders and threat hunters use the Cybereason platform to scope security incidents, to hunt for breaches. It's not only just a way to communicate, it is a way to interact with the data by searching and pivoting on attack indicators. Threat hunters, responders now think less in terms of raw telemetry, and more in terms of attack techniques and attack indicators, and how they can string them together into patterns that they need to be searching for, into hunt queries that they need to be building to identify unknown threats, right, or newly created threats. I think Attack now also plays a significant role in how we do our product management, right? Specifically around new detection capabilities and new data sources for telemetry. And I think Eric touched on it, but one of those areas that I think is an advancement for us that we're doing with attack that I'm extremely excited about, and I think it also represents how attack as a knowledge base is expanding. Is that we're now applying the attack taxonomy to broader and broader telemetry and detection domains. For example, using attack taxonomy to enrich, to detect, to classify a telemetry that we have from identity and access controls, from email protection controls, from network protection controls, from cloud protection controls, to really enable defenders to use attack as a unified threat management language across not just the endpoint, right, space, but across all the security domains in their environment, and really effectively measure their overall attack coverage and identify potential coverage gaps that they're getting from the full set of tools and controls in their environment.
Those are wonderful insights, and they really bring into the next topic very tightly, because the next one is attack coverage, right? You brought it up a number of times throughout that, but you also highlighted a couple what I would consider to be challenges that the coverage discussion can have. So in terms of both, right, you mentioned all the different platforms now that exist, right? The ever-growing number of techniques where coverage, getting your 100% coverage is going to be a harder and harder thing to do just because it's so broad. But then you also brought up things like understanding how techniques pair with one another, right? How the chains work, the flows, as we'll call them, how those relate, which attack doesn't really display that at a current level. So coverage is a hard topic. And so what I kind of like to do is, like, when customers ask you about attack coverage, like, how do you navigate that response? How do you find good ways of talking about it? Are there challenges? Just any experience you have in terms of the communicating attack coverage and the double-edged sword that it is?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, the goal of the attack coverage question is to understand how extensive are the visibility, the detection, and protection capabilities that a particular solution provides. And I think there are two key questions that most security teams are trying to answer by asking a solution provider for their attack coverage. I think first and foremost, it's about the solution's ability to mitigate security gaps that the organization is concerned about. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Frank. I think there is sort of a bad way to use it, and I think there's a more by design way to use it. I think trying to find a solution that will encompass the entire matrix, right? Trying to strive for a single solution that will cover everything and anything in the matrix may not be an effective way to look at this. I think different solutions have their strengths and their areas that they're not intended to be used in. And it's about having a fabric of capabilities that give you that coverage. But I think if organizations focus on areas that they're mostly concerned about, I think that's a more effective way to look at it, right? So for example, if an organization is concerned about their ability to see and detect lateral movement in their networks, I think it's going to be important for them to identify solutions that can demonstrate good attack coverage for lateral movement techniques, as an example. I think the second key question that security teams are trying to answer by asking a solution provider for their attack coverage is to identify a control overlap, right? Or in other words, as an organization, do I have multiple controls that mitigate the same risk or give me similar benefits? And if that's the case, it may make sense to remove overlapping controls for better operational efficiency. Or on the other hand, there may be areas where I don't have coverage at all, and it may make sense to look into solutions that close these gaps. And so as a solution provider, when someone asks me about our attack coverage, what comes to my mind is how do we effectively communicate the span of our visibility, detection, and protection capabilities across the attack matrix, not trying to form a narrative of how we cover everything, but really those areas where we have significant added value in, so we can effectively communicate that added value.
I really like that. I really like the being able to focus in. And I think that is something that, at least my experience with attack eval has always taught me, right? Everybody was striving for these hundreds, which are great in certain circumstances, but it really comes down to how, and answering that. So I really like the understanding your options type of things. And definitely we'll come back to that in a couple of minutes here. But Eric, I wanted to give you a chance. It looked like you had wanted to jump in as well to answer that. And I know you come in with definitely a lot more customer engagement type of perspectives as well. So from your perspective, attack coverage, do you have anything additional to say or anything that specifically resonated with what Israel just brought up?
Yeah, I'd say, from the mind of the security practitioner, it's operationalizing the framework and reporting on that coverage is still, there's a lot of friction, right, with that. And my mind goes to kind of the MITRE ATT&CK Defender course, which recently came out. I think it's a great certification, and the MITRE team is continuing to add content. A lot of it is around kind of that operationalizing the framework for your real life defense and reporting. As we're talking about it, it's difficult because it requires assuming a couple things. If you're a practitioner and you're creating a heat map of maybe the 3, 4, 10 detection products you have to kind of assume that the vendor has the coverage, right? You might not have the capability to test it yourself, right? Or you're looking at, eval results. It needs to be configured, properly and maybe out of the box. And then, it is kind of arduous, even if you get the detection mappings from all the vendors, to merge them into one. And you kind of have to say, like, if I have overlapping detections, then I'm covered. And so it does require, a bit of faith and a couple assumptions in place.
Yeah, no, and you both did an amazing job of transitioning to what I wanted to bring up as well, which is at Tidal, right? You guys hit on a couple key things that we're trying to do. So one of the things that we're doing in our platform is create a community edition, which is centered around providing visibility, not just into attack, but what to do about attack, right? So give for a given technique, what are the solutions that exist out there that could defend you against this? Which ones do you maybe have? Which ones could you maybe get? And understanding and evaluating which one is right for you. So going to understanding your options, and that not one product is the end all be all necessarily, or going to the operationalization of attack, right? Both of those are key concepts to Tidal that we're trying to do with the community platform. You guys have, for truth and transparency, submitted your data to us to be able to be included in that platform. And so wondering, what was it that really resonated with you, and why would you want to participate in this initiative, right? Because at the end of the day, you're disclosing your capabilities into that public domain to benefit the community. But what was it that resonated? Maybe Eric, start with you, and then Israel, if you've got anything following, feel free to chime in.
Yeah, I think the big one is for a lot of security teams today, it's hard to implement MITRE ATT&CK, and they need to, it's currently the MITRE ATT&CK evaluations, they're the gold standard for technical testing. And so I think the work that Tidal Cyber is doing to make the framework more understandable, accessible to teams, I think helping vendors catalog and even, validate those detections. I think there needs to be, more companies doing this kind of work. And so certainly we welcome it. Thank you.
And Israel, did you have any additional comments as somebody that's been around the community and contributing for as long as you have? What kind of resonated with you?
So that's really the key word. I think, Frank, you hit it on the key word for me, right? That word community. I think first and foremost, I think Tidal Cyber is taking that spirit of transparency and community collaboration that surrounds and drives attack really to the next level by making attack coverage information even more accessible and more actionable to practitioners. And I think that by creating a repository of that attack coverage that's provided by different solutions, maintain that repository to ensure it's up to date, and curating it in a way that makes it accessible and actionable to a broader set of security practitioners, I think Tidal Cyber is increasing the transparency and accountability, as well as advancing the art of threat-informed defense. And those are really some of the key aspects that resonated with me about this effort.
Yeah, and I really appreciate especially the focus on that word transparency. It's one that I held near and dear back when I was at MITRE, and something that we and my other two co-founders who all came from MITRE as well, really took with us, right? It's that ability to be transparent and just bring transparency and trust, right? Have trust that vendors can communicate what they do and give them a platform to talk about what they do, and just provide more flexibility and structure around it so that that they can talk about it in their own words. So definitely appreciate both of that. And as I said, for Cybereason contributing their data. One other thing I wanted to cycle back to is something that you actually brought up, Israel, in terms of being able to address attack coverage and understanding, being able to give visibility into the unique things that a given product does. What are their strengths? And so I wanted to make sure we followed up to when we ask, tell me about Cybereason's coverage, right? Attack coverage. What are some of the more noteworthy things that you would like to really draw out about how you guys cover attack or attack techniques?
It's a very good question. There are usually two things that I mean, I think there are a lot of things that we do that drive value from an attack coverage perspective, but there are two things that I'm really, I think, proud of the most. Number one is our ability to now bring in additional telemetry sources. Right? We, as you know, Cybereason started from the endpoint space. But we've grown into a place where we can bring in very effectively additional telemetry sources from the network, from the email, from the identity, and from other places, and maintaining a consistent way to map the different sources of telemetry into attack and providing that coverage, I think, is one area that I'm very proud of. The other thing is the approach that we've taken for attack coverage is that it's not only tagging or enriching detections with attack techniques or sub-techniques that matters. But for a lot of our customers, the data matters. They want to be able to use attack taxonomy and use attack techniques to better analyze the data at their fingertips. And so one of the approaches that we've taken is to essentially enrich every piece of data, every piece of telemetry that we collect, whether we think it's malicious or suspicious or neither, to enrich it with how we believe it aligns or it maps to the attack matrix. What that enables our users to do is to bring their own expertise with attack, not only rely on the things that we pre-built into the product to classify them as detections, but to use their expertise, to use their knowledge to build repositories that are custom to them, right, for detections and analytics that use attack taxonomy and leverage our telemetry that is tagged with attack or enriched with attack to facilitate these processes. So the second thing is really about, and I think we're seeing more of it in the industry, and I think it's a wonderful effort to make sure that all the data that we collect as an industry is mapped to attack, not just detection data, right? Raw telemetry that enables people to bring their own expertise and reuse assets that they create on their own that leverage attack.
That's great. Yeah, no, I love that, especially as somebody who has been into that detection engineering, threat hunting phase, the ability to enrich your own analytics and do your own mappings and qualify that, like, definitely resonates a lot with me. Eric, I'll give you a chance to do any final words, if there's anything specifically noteworthy that you want to draw out in terms of how you view Cybereason's attack coverage.
Yeah, and my mind goes to kind of the MITRE ATT&CK evals data and the detections library that we've shared with you to do the mapping. I think what stands out for us my mind goes to the modifiers in the evals. So the configuration change and the delayed. And so I think, as we know, every time the MITRE ATT&CK evaluations, come up and we're excited for round 5, there's a huge marketing push. Everybody won, they're all number one. I think what's nice at Cybereason is, we're proud to have participated in every, evaluation to date and consistently on really being effective out of the box, low configuration changes and, surfacing the malop, the malicious operation in real time and not having that delayed modifier. And so as Israel mentioned, a lot of the efficiencies from the data collection to the enrichment to the mapping to MITRE and just that focus on being easy to use, actionable and surface it in real time, I think is what makes us effective against real world attacks.
Definitely. And one of the things that I'll kind of call out specifically in the Tidal platform, we do have configuration information, right? We want vendors to be able to say whether things are part of default configurations or part of special rule sets. Not to imply that you shouldn't have configurable solutions. Configurations are great, but let's be transparent about what requires what, and give end users the ability to decide what matters for them. So I definitely appreciate you calling out specifically those couple elements that users can even see parts of in the Tidal platform as well. So makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, that concludes the message. I do appreciate the fact that you guys did jump into this community, being able to help really drive transparency forward, that you've been such a long time practitioners, users, advocators of the attack knowledge base, as you mentioned, going through every attack evaluations program. That's a noteworthy thing, right? Being able to have jumped in the early days, seen it through the evolution, and then now to Tidal, being able to submit your data to this. So again, we can hopefully benefit the community, broaden awareness of capability. So I really appreciate it, and appreciate you guys being on board. But thank you very much, and have a good one and good luck.